Okay, so hello everybody. Can you all hear me? Yes, right? Okay. My name is Hong Ying and I'm the president of Yuan US Global China Connection. So thank you all today for joining us for the 2021 Global China Connection Global Summit New Retail panel titled Riding the Tide of China's New Retail Economy, which is jointly organized by Yuan US and NYU GCC, DEAN, which stands for Duke East Asia Nexus, and the Young Seekers. So let me give all of you a brief introduction for the organizers for today's panel. First up, we have DEAN. DEAN is a student organization that aims to promote dialogue and discussion in East Asia through their in-house publication, speaker events, panels, and conferences such as their annual Duke UNC China Leadership Summit. Next up, we have the Young Seekers, which is the first and only Southeast Asia-based nonprofit with a China and ASEAN angle, and they aspire to bring together vibrant and competent youths who are passionate about advancing the ASEAN-China region. And lastly, we have Global China Connection. So our organization is a global professional development organization dedicated to connecting and empowering young leaders who share an interest in China. And our Global Summit is an annual event that they basically aims to promote dialogue on topics related to China and the world. And this year, our GCC Global Summit consists of 12 online panels organized by chapters from all across the globe. And we have 3 panels left for our Global Summit series, so do show your support for us and register for them if you're interested. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our 4 distinguished speakers for today's panel. So first up, we have Professor Lu Yao Chang. She's an assistant professor of economics and a senior research scientist of data science at Duke Kunshan University. And her area of specialization includes behavioral science, artificial intelligence, financial technology, and big data. Next, we have Faith. Faith is an entrepreneur and new retail advisor with over 12 years of experience in the technology retail space. And she's the CEO of 8XP, which she started in 2019. And it is a smart retail platform that allows retailers to operate physical stores like digital stores. She was also a user experience design advisor at Alibaba Group, where she led the user experience team based in Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Hangzhou to redesign the Lazada business-to-business platforms. Thirdly, we have Kai Wu. Kai is Airwallex Greater China CEO, and he oversees the company's strategy and operations in Greater China. He was also a core member of the Financial Services Leadership Group at Boston Consulting Group prior to joining Airwallex, and he was also advisor for private equity on major investments in top fintech companies in China. Prior to Boston Consulting Group, he also worked at Bertelsmann Asia Investments, covering investments in technology, media and telecom, TMT, and fintech industries. And last but not least, we have Ian Tan. Ian Tan is the CEO of Mowin Digital, a marketing agency tech company hybrid, which uses marketing technology, also known as MarTech, products to deliver marketing returns for their clients. And prior to Mowin Digital, Ian Tan was based in China, working with Chinese brands and organizations to market their products and services globally. His experience involves working with Fortune 500 companies like Dell, Mercedes-Benz, and Sinopec on their social marketing technology and data analytics systems and optimizing their technology stack. So now I'll be passing the time over to Ben. Ben is a sophomore and a friend of mine here at Yuan US, and he'll be the moderator for today's panel. So before that, I would like to point off your attention to the Q&A box. If any of you have any questions during the panel, just feel free to type your questions in, and during the Q&A section, Ben will pick your questions and you can have them answered. Okay, so over to you, Ben.
Thanks so much, Hong Ying. Thank you everybody for coming for today's panel. And thank you so much, panelists, for coming to share your views. Just to start us off, I think we are going to have a round of opening speeches. Let's start with the ladies. So Prof Zhang, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you so much. It's my great honor here to talk about this topic with all the industry pioneers. So hope my talk is not going to be too far-fetched and theoretical. So I made a lucid chart for this new retail economy. So from the web, you can check for the definition of new retail. It is a term Alibaba uses to describe the blending of online and offline commerce through the digitalization of the entire retail value chain for the benefit of both the merchant and the customer. So to have some comparative advantages, I'm going to talk from 3 aspects that's also related to my research. So those 3 aspects are data, method, and technology. And I will also run through what is the new opportunity, what is a new challenge, and what are the possible solutions. So the first new opportunity comes with new retail is this big data thing. So in the past, it would be so costly and difficult to research customers. For behavioral research, for example, even in academia, we need to first to apply for a huge grant and design some controlled experiments to collect the data from people, so we can start how we can design a better product that make their life better off. However, nowadays, because for example, in digital marketing, we don't need to file paper anymore. We can just use Qualtrics, and all the data gets automatically collected, and all the statistics gets calculated immediately. So that's really wonderful. So we can know the preference of our customers, how to provide a better product. However, there is also new challenges. The challenges came more from the privacy side and ethics side. This problem, if we cannot solve it, it would kind of like prevent customers from willing to provide the true information. So for example, sometimes you might heard your friends talking about, oh, I just talked to my husband, we want to go for a vacation. And then whenever I open Google, it keep recommending me the air flight tickets. Then people now tries to turn their phone off and the location off. So for that's a big issue. Actually, in academic research, before collecting data, we have to apply for ethical approval, run through a very strict process. But this thing is not practical in business applications. A remedy for this, this is one area I'm very passionate for, is like the research for cryptography and blockchain. It might help people automatically solve this problem. So we can research for people's behavior and their preference, but we can also identify who they are. And the second new opportunity is the method. So in the past, I love mathematics, but if you are going to calculate on a paper, use your pen for like 1 million entries of customers' data, it's going to take forever. We cannot finish before we die. But now, because Python, for example, is so fast, and we can use different kinds of algorithms like machine learning to do the analysis, that it's just so quick. We can do some clustering and find the customer characteristics and who, as the most recent customer, buys the most and pays the company the most, so we can identify them for like the target group to market. That is a new opportunity. However, here also comes a new challenge, which is the black box. So unfortunately, actually, machine learning can only guarantee the result works for this set of data. It tells a little bit about whether the result still works for a new situation for another group of people. Especially the machine learning result only works for a normal person, the majority who are very normal. But if you are a person who are just so unique and special, machine learning does not work for you and does not work for new situations. So in that case, we have a remedy here. It's called something called explainable AI. So it's a combination of traditional mathematical models that's more that more fits novel situation, but also use machine learning. So for example, if a patient comes to a hospital, we will first use explainable mathematical modeling to see if this person is a normal case or a very rare case. If it's a normal case, we use machine learning algorithms to just do some standardized test. If not, we will pass the person to very senior experts. And the last opportunity is technology. So in the past, it would be difficult to imagine how we can do transaction so quickly with people around the world. But right now, due to the fintech technology, it's not that difficult to do transaction with people in a different place and in a different time. So here we have a new challenge as well. That is inclusion versus target customer. So for most of the fintech technologies like Ethereum, blockchains, they were and Bitcoins, they were designed for everyone. So they thought they were designed for everyone. They want to be very inclusive. However, not many people, especially the elder people and people who are very conventional and traditional, it might take time for them to accept this technology and to learn how to trade on Ethereum blockchain. So that might be the inclusion problem. Also, when it gets so inclusive, but people are different. In the past, when we do business, the first thing we ask is, what is our target customer? What is our customer persona? But right now, when it becomes so inclusive, technology cannot solve this problem. But maybe companies can remedy this problem by the collaboration between AI and human intelligence. So and also provide some service and products that's more with humanity and more customized. Yeah, so that's all for my speech today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. That's a really, really broad overview of the new frontier of new retail. Let's move a little bit more into the specifics and have Faith take us from the perspective of a designer, what it's like looking at new retail today. Sorry, Faith, I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. So thank you, Fong, for the introduction earlier in terms of my background. So just a quick overview again. My experience has always been in the retail and technology space. Started off with having e-commerce funded by the Singapore government and SPH Group. So I've been in China for around 4 years. My experience in Alibaba and working with brands. Then till the recent year has been working in more towards designing the whole supply chain for the new retail infrastructure. So from my perspective as a designer and specifically user experience designer, new retail was coined by Jack Ma. The theory behind this design is basically how are we going to redesign the people, product, and platform. So these three things, right, is basically the whole methodology behind the new retail, whereby as consumer is becoming more advanced, tech savvy, the new consumption behavior has been created due to, the past having content commerce, live stream commerce, and all these new ways to buy things. Of course, due to the recent pandemic as well, the whole retail landscape is changing, especially for the offline part. So there's a joke that everyone keeps saying is that it's not the CTO that's pushing digital transformation. It's basically a COVID-19 that is pushing the digital transformation. So I think for this part specifically, the new retail terms right now, is basically the future of retail, where right now overseas, some of the foreigner is basically using a new word already because they feel that new retail sounds very, like, what do you mean by new? So some of them basically start talking about phygital, so physical plus digital stores. So I think the whole methodology behind this design, right, is how do you recreate the modern user experience for the modern Gen Z or the future people that, probably shop from mobile, or they're going to shop from iPad, or going to shop from your offline store. So the recent years, right, what we realized from all this, like some of the success new retail cases whereby you can see maybe, like Luckin Coffee, although like ignore the IPO for now, but the whole design, you think about it right now, is that they have a very strong distribution and fulfillment design. So when we talk about design, right, it's not just towards consumer design, but also towards the business partner design. When we are a very big platform or a very big retail company, we're dealing with very huge logistic fulfillment, supply chain manufacturing, and towards consumer side to fulfill that kind of experience that they desire, right, which send them within 3 hours and things like that. That's why for Luckin Coffee, they multi-purpose their offline store to not just sell things, but also to do fulfillment and distribution. So they are stores, in a way, it's not just like, traditional stores, they basically only serve maybe one purpose, selling to consumer. They have stocks over there. So it's like a space. The revenue per SQM is fixed by how many SKU and how many people is going to visit your store. But in the future, where everyone is doing right now already, is that you need to multi-purpose your store for different purposes and increase the revenue per SQM by connecting online e-commerce, meaning that your offline store is going to be an amplifier. You think of it like a, maybe your router or something like that, to basically direct traffic and loyalty and retention back to online. So that is what they meant by omnichannel. Because when they talk about omnichannel, which is also part of new retail, previously they were talking about multi-channel, which what I mentioned right now, like for example, Singapore, a retail scene. Not a lot of retailers might be very savvy in e-commerce. Then there's also a difference between e-commerce and marketplaces, because marketplaces is basically Shopify, Shopee, Lazada, Tokopedia, Amazon. These are marketplaces. E-commerce is basically, you set out e-commerce, which can be Shopify, Magento, or any kind of e-commerce software. But it's very different, because marketplace is literally like maybe like a mega mall, whereby there's a lot of competing vendor. Then there's huge traffic that you're gonna compete, and they have their own gameplay, which is like Double 11, Double 12, and all this thing. So I think for new retail, based on my experience and my understanding, it's more towards the whole like the whole retail industry, from supply chain to design to consumer facing touch point. It can be TikTok, it can be any kind of content live stream, or like Lazada live stream or Taobao live stream. It's basically this whole chain. And for different company, they have different DNA. For example, for luxury store, they rely a lot of like white glove services and offline touch point to basically sell to their customer, because they are luxury. It's very different. But for maybe like grocery stores or like mid-tier kind of brand, whereby they are selling fast fashion, is very different. So that is why understanding retail characteristic, and then every brand has different way of operating. Maybe their sales is pricing control is the same. For example, for Chanel, all the pricing control is the same. But for different brand, if you look at them, maybe different country, they have different pricing. So each different step, right, is basically a step-by-step of a digital transformation from traditional retail to new retail, which is also the digital future of retail. So that's why I think the important thing is to understand that having the understanding of the traditional retail, then that is when you can use technology to help them move step by step better, and then optimize and evaluate all these data point or any kind of technology we're using to assess better what kind of decision they need to make in the future for better RPSQM or like decreasing costs. Yeah, so that's like overall what I understand from my past experience lah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Faith. I think that it's a really interesting insight, understanding that the traditional still has a place in today's retail market, but in a very, very different way. I think we'll take it from a different perspective now from Yenton, who will give us a little bit more of the marketing side. So explain a little bit more about why there are new entities like Kuaishou coming up and new trends coming on.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Yenton. I'm from Mowen Digital. First of all, I'd like to thank Hong Ying and Benjamin for inviting me, as well as the folks at the Young Seekers who has actually invited me along to join this discussion panel. So happy to share a bit about what I know over here. Just a bit of background, Mowen Digital, we are a MarTech focused marketing agency. So I myself lived in Beijing from 2008 during the Olympics till 2015. So moving back to Singapore, I'm still pretty much focused on a lot of Chinese MarTech, where we have a Beijing office working on a lot of tech development as well as traditional agency work. So just to share a bit this morning about what we have been doing so far, and probably this morning I will probably focus a bit on the technology aspect of things. So when we talk about new retail, I believe earlier on, some of the speakers actually have mentioned about the background, so from Alibaba and stuff like that. So I wouldn't dwell too much on that, but how about the inspirations from the new retail in terms of the technology aspect, and in terms of new retail, because of the comprising of physical stores, your offline channels, how does it really apply in the technology space? I believe Dr. Prof. Lu Yao just now shared quite a fair bit about the kind of in-depth data and analysis and the analytics that we can get from it, which is really interesting. And these are some of the work that we are actually working on. So today, probably I can also touch a bit fair on these 4 key trends that we see in 2021. First of which is shoppable media. I think this is quite common right now. I will go more in depth, as well as in e-commerce automation. What kind of automation solutions that we actually have came up with, share a bit about what we do internally in terms of this term called e-commerce automation. I believe automation is an unavoidable trend together with AI and analytics. These are very important things. Over here at Movin, we also advocate analytics and automation. So this is actually a very key part in terms of scalability, as well as how part of the whole digital transformation for SMEs to enterprise level. Next, I also want to talk a bit about the retail as a service concept, not so much focus on the other aspect of things, but having said that, how does retail become a service for both consumers as well as merchants these days? And lastly, I think the whole key elements of social commerce is very important these days. Okay, so when I talk about social shoppable media, I think maybe a lot of people would be actually thinking about, oh, how about these are online models? These are actually pure online. So that how does it relate to new retail? I think there are interesting things that we actually learn and taking inspirations from, especially from a Chinese e-commerce space, where we can see that it's actually more mature from a technological aspect, where compared to what we have here in around the world, including the US, where it's not as technical savvy or plugged into existing social media platform. Yes, you do have your Instagram that you can shop on, but in terms of, for example, live stream shopping and stuff like that, it's only beginning to take off here in this part of the world. And then how do you actually bring them there? I think the next stage is how do we also tap on all this shoppable video on traditional medias like your out of home advertising, out on your TV advertising. So etc. These are all also considered offline models that actually people will work on, and consumers on their end will be able to shop at their free will, be it on different kind of formats of media per se, or any kind of medium that they are on. The next, I think, is quite important that we can see that in this year as well, the focus on social commerce, how do you sell on social platforms, is also very important. On what we do, I do not want to go into the technical details. Anyone that is actually keen on finding out more about the technical details, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to share. But there are a few things that I want to touch on the social commerce point of view. We have seen a lot of our customers and brands trying to pivot WeChat as a what we call SCDP, social customer data platform, where they will revolve most of their activities within the WeChat as an ecosystem or a CRM tool. CRM in our industry, customer relationship management, is actually a very important tool. And actually, as you can see, the trends of technology trends of data moving towards the cookieless. I'm not so sure if everyone is actually familiar. In China, I think Prof. Lu Yao also mentioned a bit about the data privacy and stuff like that. It's also very important. And how do you then secure a platform where first-party data that you collect, that intelligence they can collect based on your customers, how do you optimize your customer journey becomes therefore very important. So WeChat has become a SCDP pivot. We have seen clients moving part of their CRM onto WeChat. For ourselves, for example, Dell that we work with, we are actually sitting here in Singapore, helping them to integrate their China customer data back into the global platform to enhance the whole customer journey, unified identity, social identity for their customers. So the second thing that we also see that is very important is the whole entire customer lifecycle tracking, right from the very start when you're actually doing awareness campaign down to after purchasing, and then how do you encourage your customers to share and stuff like that. So these are actually very important elements of social commerce as well. Then the whole ecosystem become built up, and then the only way you can actually do it is actually to pivot it to a technology platform that you'll be able to track. And I think as all of us know very well, I think WeChat is a very important platform in China. It's the whole entire ecosystem that's built into it, from payment to social, to using as I call it, micro businesses would use it even as an ERP in our terms, using it as a technology tool to operate their business. I think in all these aspects, this has become very important. Lastly, I think we also see very interesting trends in terms of how do you automate your social commerce processes? How do you make sure that real-time wise you are able to reach out to your client and then personalize the message based on this? In China, they call it the one message, 1,000 message to 1,000 people. So how do you actually personalize different messages for different kind of audiences, different kind of personas that you're actually dealing with because of the insights that you have about your customers? Next, I think what we do a lot here is also in terms of e-commerce automation. So in terms of e-commerce automation, I think three main things that I think is interesting to talk about: transaction data or intent data, we call it from our perspective. How do you actually understand more? And this is actually starting to become a very interesting trend here in Singapore, where we are also making references to what they are doing in China and bringing it here to this part of the world. So for example, we actually launched a product which you will see with Jingdong recently, last year, end of last year, where we are their first exclusive partner to to work together on their cloud data to serve what we call e-commerce DSP to their to target customers. So these are something that we're actually bringing on the board to discuss with people like Shopee over here, that whether we are able to integrate social with e-commerce. The other thing is in terms of targeting, acquiring targeted audiences. How do you actually make your marketing spend more worthwhile? I think just now, Faith also mentioned that there's so much data, there's so much audiences that you're actually driving at. So at the end of the day, are you actually able to spend money on acquiring the right audiences? Are you putting your marketing spend into where it is? This has become more important for brands. Instead of sending a message and blast out, hope that people that you like actually, or really someone out there will actually be interested in your product or services. And lastly, I think importantly, it's also increasing sales conversion. On marketplaces that we've discussed right now, I think volume and traffic is not the issue, and it's actually an advantage, especially for new market entrants. But then how do you actually increase sales conversion? Make sure every of your marketing spend is worthwhile. I think this is one of the important trends, or a lot of brands are actually putting as an emphasis on for their goals this year. So I actually included this video
公众号粉丝通过推文或菜单
just to share with everyone what I'm talking about, because I'm sure not everyone is quite familiar with WeChat or how the ecosystem works. So this is just a demonstration. Pardon me, this is actually in Chinese, so I thought it would be actually interesting to share on the product that we launched with Jingdong last year.
进入品牌京东店，有过浏览、领券、下单等行为，根据京东行为及订单数据，向没有下单的粉丝自动推送活动和领券消息。公众号粉丝在24小时后收到定向促销消息提示，通过针对性活动特惠，二次唤醒购物欲望，回到活动页完成下单。
Yeah. So for the benefit of non-English speakers earlier on, that part actually is basically how do you actually help to automate certain processes, identify potential customers from abandoned cart, we typically call them, and then integrate it and open it in your WeChat. So in local terms, for example, right now, you have been shopping on your Lazada or Shopee, you have put something into your cart right now. Traditionally, I mean, it's an open question for all. I love to hear opinions. Do you actually even look at the messages in terms of reminding you to buy your products? So I think I see Hong Ying tapping no. Yeah, it's very common, and you won't look at it. In-app messaging, email, or even SMS has very, very low conversion rates. But just to share an interesting statistic over here, on social messaging, or at least on WeChat right now, we see an open rate of at least 70%. So that's actually a very, very high rate compared to traditional methods. So brands are actually tapping on this approach from a social messaging perspective or social commerce perspective to actually engage their customers and actually increase sales conversion. Okay. Lastly, I think I want to end off, as you can see, we are also a JD partner. So in JD.com, the retail as a service concept is actually something that they came up with, or in terms of new retail, they term it differently because they want to be different, right? They are calling themselves from a borderless commerce, which means that there's no definition between digital and physical stores. And then I think the key thing over here for a lot of consumers and for merchants is that delivering a service using technology as well as their tools to enable both of these audiences to be able to conduct their customer journey much more effectively, and for merchants to conduct their business more effectively. So one example is that the vision that Jingdong has is that you can be a drop shipper, or you can be someone who's selling a Singapore product in Singapore, and you don't need to think about too many things. Once you get on board their platform, you are able to sell to a specific customers. They will help you to take care of the entire logistic process, to the product and etc., and the sales process, so that you can just sitting there and making money. And even if you are someone who doesn't even have a product to sell from a merchant perspective, they have a list of inventory or partners that they work with for people like us who wants to sell, to choose from, and actually curate from this list of products to create your own store and sell. So this is the kind of things that we're actually talking about in terms of retail as a service. Okay, with this, I think I spoke a bit too long, so I'll hand over back to Benjamin.
Thank you so much, Yenton. I think it's really, really interesting just looking at the shape of logistics solutions nowadays. They are starting to shape up together with social commerce. So I think, but for now, let's before we get more into it, and I think there's a lot that we can have within the discussion section. Let's look at payments and transactions in the new retail space. Kai, would you like to take us through that?
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, happy to meet you all, and allow me to share my screen. And yeah, thank you for all the attendees time again, and hope we can use this time to discuss a bit about our observation in the payments industry, and how the COVID impact the payments industry and also the e-commerce industry, and what opportunities we have in this post-COVID era. So I would very quickly introduce what we see in the industry trend, in the past 5 years. Basically, we see China has a very fast penetration in the retail e-commerce. While after the COVID, or since the COVID happened last year, basically the penetration of the cross-border the e-commerce of the Western market also accelerates a lot. If you see the growth, in the last year, basically it's around 4% increase of the penetration just in year 2020. And if you calculate, the past 4 years from 2015 to 2019, it's also only around 5.7%. So basically, last year in Western market, the penetration of e-commerce actually had undergone, the journey it took 4 years. So it's a 3 or 4 times kind of a faster kind of a penetration of the e-commerce in the Western markets. And we see still kind of China's retail e-commerce industry is still well ahead of the rest of the world, but we believe that discrepancy might being smaller and smaller. And we know that there are innovative models in China, such as live streaming, social commerce, as also mentioned by Yenton, and those kind of new business models of e-commerce has all born out of the China market now and quickly adopted by overseas players. So we see a lot of our customers, those live streaming players, they are now also go to market with those kind of a social commerce platforms. And also we clearly see big platforms such as TikTok has now cooperated with Shopify for their social commerce launch overseas. So it's we see the success of China's cross-border e-commerce model is going to be more and more replicated into overseas with the penetration of all those Chinese entrepreneurs bringing those business models. So in the past 5 years, through 2015 to 2020, the scale of cross-border e-commerce transactions in China, as you can see in trillion yuan, is already achieved over 6 trillion in China in 2020. So the cross-border e-commerce in China has started early and now accumulated more and more experience. So there is a significant potential in its continued expansion, while we also see a very huge opportunity outside China. And to facilitate and to really accelerate the growth and facilitate the penetration of the e-industry, basically, those capital plays a very important role in there. There are 2 important roles for capitals. First is like, it actually accelerates the growth, as we mentioned, as I mentioned, for this industry. Second, it also helps, those good players to stand out, and it also accelerates, the dying of those, kind of bad sellers. But still, we need to have a sense like, there are more than 3,000 daily new sellers on Amazon platform. So about, 142 per hour, or new sellers per minute. While, out of all those, only like 3.3% are really large stores on Amazon platform, just use an example. So when we say like, large stores, it means like, their annual sales is more than 1 million. So only 3.3% of them are like that. And more than 90% of them are just like, very small sellers on Amazon. Sometimes it's just like, sole proprietor, but a lot of those times it's like, dying there. So investors' active engagement have empowered e-commerce sellers and platforms to focus on those long-term value creation and also achieve leapfrog growth. So in year 2020, we see like there are more than 3 billion yuan in total investments in the e-commerce industry. So like, Shein, Fordio as the, kind of e-commerce platforms, and Fordio is very much focused on Middle East, while Shein is more focused on the Western markets. And also we see like, ASINking, which is an ERP, but it's a much lighter version of an ERP for those cross-border e-commerce. They all received huge amounts of money from investors, both inside China and outside China. We see like cross-border e-commerce platforms are becoming true Chinese, we call it like multinational corporates. So back to my childhood, basically, we always see the brands from overseas multinational corporates like, Unilever, P&G, Coca-Cola, etc. Right? Now we also see like very similar Chinese brands going across China to those overseas markets, just like what those MNCs had done before. So in the last decade, Chinese suppliers are more kind of serve as a supply chain. So they might serve like OEM, ODM for a lot of brands, and we all know like made in China, but actually brand from China is something still rare. But in the next decade, we believe like those Chinese brands are going to establish their presence in a lot of those markets, as we highlight here, like in the UK and Europe, and also in the Russia market, and also in the Southeast Asia and the Northern Asia market, and also in the North America, of course. So to facilitate the growth of those e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, basically the infrastructure for them is very important. And payment is an extremely important infrastructure out of there, as it facilitates the money movement for all those kind of e-commerce players, and also for like online travel, etc., etc. So we are going to have a quick introduction of our company. So Airwallex, our vision is to be the global financial cloud to empower businesses to operate anywhere, anytime. And we are covered by a lot of media as the like fintech creates new infrastructure to replace those traditional transactions, and also as the highest ranked Australian firm in those top global 100 fintech. We received a lot of kind of support from those global top tier investors. So including Salesforce Ventures, ANZ, Square Pack, Hugh House Capital, MasterCard, DST Global, Sequoia, Tencent, etc., etc. So since we founded in 2015, we have received more than $500 million investments from all those top tier investors, and last year our valuation reached $2.6 billion. So Airwallex, what we are doing, right? So we provides a local expertise and leadership supported by our global capabilities. So now we have over more than 15 offices around the globe, and we covered 7 time zones and have more than actually, this is a little bit outdated number. Currently, we have close to 700 employees around the globe. So we have our offices in mostly in Asia Pacific. So we are deeply rooted there. We founded in Melbourne, and we grow a lot of our business from Greater China customers. And now we also expanded into the Western markets, such as the North America and also UK and Europe. So what does a global financial cloud mean? It's more like a toggle on and off, experience for our customers to use different features, different functionalities of this global financial cloud. And it is extremely easy to access, and also with a very bearable and reasonable cost, and with a much faster speed compared to the traditional financial infrastructure. So we have like pay in, pay out, and also those wallet management. So for paying, we have those online payments, basically help those merchants or those online sellers to receive payments globally, no matter it is through cards, through bank transfers, or through direct debit. And also we have those global accounts to manage their global treasury so that they can collect foreign currencies via those local currency accounts. And then for the payout part, we also have like global transfer and card issuing so that they can pay out to their suppliers, to their vendors, to their individual contractors through either like account to account transfer or through like card payments. And in the middle, we have those wallet management systems so that our customer can use us to host a multi-currency wallet and use it to get hold different multiple currencies and connect to the local bank account globally. And also, we provide a very successful and useful proprietary foreign exchange engine so that they can use a very user-friendly interface to operate that and also get an interbank FX rates. Airwallex leveraged the cross-border e-commerce ecosystem to empower those sellers to succeed. So not only like we provide those underlying payment infrastructure, but also we are coping with and collaborating with a lot of players in this ecosystems for the e-commerce industry. So such as those e-commerce marketplaces or platforms such as Amazon, eBay, Shopify, Newegg, Fnac, etc. And also we work with those bank and venture capitals. Some of those are investors in us. Some of those are strategic partners with us, so that they will also bring the extensive investments in our customers or in our partners to help them to grow even faster. And also we have a lot of cloud platforms working with us, such as Jungle Scout, Tencent Cloud, and all those logistics players and data players, and those online marketing platforms, so that our customers can really enjoy a very comprehensive solution and infrastructure powered by us or partnered with us. So I think this is a very brief introduction of our observation of the industry, and also an introduction of Airwallex. And just a very quick add here is we are also hiring our summer intern program. So we hope we are going to share more information next Monday. So hope anyone interested in the summer internship program with us to really submit your CV and your resume to us. And we hiring product engineering, strategy, and also a lot of those middle office functions such as finance and operations. So looking forward to your joining. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kai. I think that's a really, really interesting call. Not just a call for us to apply for your internships, but I think to really pay attention to the shifting payments and transaction space across the world that's driven by e-commerce and the new phase of retail. So I think now we're going to shift into the next part of our discussion. We're going to have a small discussion amongst the panelists. Just a reminder for our audience that later on there will be a Q&A section. If you have any burning questions, please put them in the Q&A box below, not the chat box, and we will get to them in a short while. But for now, I think it's been very clear across, I think there's been a theme that the personalization and the customer identity really does affect the customer loyalty nowadays, for especially bridging both offline and online solutions for retail. So I think the first question I'd like to ask is, what do you think is the most important metric actually for retailers nowadays? What will we be looking at? Should we be looking at cohort retention? Should we be looking at take rates? Should we be looking at basket sizes? What do you think is the most important metric for companies to scale? And I will direct this to anybody who would like to just share their views.
I think I can share a bit on this first to kickstart. From my point of view, I think, like I mentioned just now, revenue per SQM online. Online basically is pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people might know already that there's basically the average basket size, then increasing the churn over a year. So I think for offline it's more, like more traditional, but basically to move into a new retail space, specifically, no matter what kind of brand it is, it can be e-commerce brand or traditional brand, it's a matter of time that they're going to have an offline presence. So for offline presence, it's going to be revenue per SQM. Then basically, like I mentioned just now, the traditional revenue per SQM is basically from calculated from how many SKU you have in stores, then how big is the space. So it's limited by the space. So in order to move into this angle, like I think what everyone mentioned just now, especially when we talk about data, is that I think the first step is to re-evaluate the performance of the existing physical store. So the revenue per SQM calculation needs to be changed, including some of the, like for example, how many data points can you get from this offline store? So that is when you can calculate not just in terms of revenue per SQM, but per SQM, how many data points are you going to collect? So that is why I think that is something that would be a first initial, analyzing stage for them to start understanding what could have been improved for their physical store. So that is basically the first step to answer your question.
Thank you, Faith. Prof Zhang, would you like to share what you think about the metrics?
Yes, I think for the new retail, maybe we need to, besides the traditional matrix, we need to add some matrix that considers more about sustainability and long-term effects. So I think Faith, she mentioned a very great one. Another thing I want to mention is about automation. So sometimes when we design a product or service, it only works for this time, but not for a long time. So for service that really design a pipeline would have much higher value than a service that only works for once. Yeah. So I think that would be the automation level, like how can the current service become a pipeline? So how mature it is.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting, really important actually, to looking at how automation does affect like the lifetime value for customers who are using both platforms. Kai, would you have any insight into like what metrics you would use? I think from a payment perspective, what do you think?
Yeah. So from payments perspective, or like more like cross-border finance perspective, I would say we beforehand traditionally we only see like a number of transactions as a very kind of key metrics for those kind of a global or cross-border retail. But nowadays we not only see those number of transactions, but also we see like those number of payouts, or those number of those number of wallet transfers in those markets to as kind of the new metrics for this industry.
Okay, I think the transaction volume definitely would be something that should be paid attention to. Yenton, what do you think for social commerce? What do you think should we be tracking?
I think from my perspective, there are actually two aspects, not specifically in social, but I think in terms of the acquisition form that I've mentioned earlier on, where do you actually acquire your customers? So I think like I mentioned, the opportunities are plenty, but without going into even converting the transactions, how much you know about converting this particular customer, I think it's a very important thing. And the other thing in respective to new retail, I think the important thing metrics that some of my clients, actually we are talking about it, one project we are working, actually is in relation to the next question that I'm going to answer later on at the Q&A. But by building the store, how do we bring the amount of traffic that we bring from online to offline, as well as how do we actually convert some offline opportunities where the transaction actually doesn't go through, but converting them online. So these are some of the metrics that brands and organizations are starting to take note of. So which is kind of interesting, and how we are able to track them effectively by driving the traffic from online to offline, as well as offline. After offline, how do you track these particular customers that converted online becomes kind of important, so that brands would know how is their media spend or their marketing spend goes along for both online and offline.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would love to know like whether you're actually getting new and organic customers coming in. But I think we've talked a little bit, we've talked quite a fair bit about what is the data that we are collecting and what we want to collect for to get into the next phase, or at least to build these companies. But so how do you think these, I think Prof. Zhang mentioned earlier that there's the new struggle, right, of finding out, of developing SOPs to protect the data of the customers. How do you think companies should preserve users' data? I think we've had several leaks actually in Singapore of customers' data, and it really does erode the trust that customers have in companies, and it can actually determine whether you have more customers on one platform or another. So what do you think companies should specifically do to protect the data of their consumers? Sorry, I didn't direct this to anybody, but if you have a view about it, please just jump in.
I feel it's not fair or sustainable if you ask a company, they must protect the customers' data. From economic perspective, there is just no direct incentive. So I would think we should use some technology or legal service to make this happen. So one thing is there has to be some law that's clarify how to release the data and how the data can be used. I think that's not at the firm level. So once that's established, the firm has the incentive to protect the consumer's data, because otherwise it's going to be punished. Another thing is we also want to reduce the cost for firm to protect customers' data, because firm's drive is to make profits, not to protect customers' data. So I would think something like the cryptography service that could automatically store the customer's data and make it protected, it would be much better. So consumer can have some smart contract that's rule-based coded to define in which case they want to release which kinds of data to the firm, so that can best benefit both the firm side and the customer side.
Thanks,
Maybe I'll
Prof.
add on a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I use a lot of customers' data, so I think I probably wanted to share a bit about our perspective. I think when we're actually working with enterprises, be it both global enterprises or Chinese enterprises, I think the importance to data privacy is taken quite seriously these days. And as you can see right now, as the WeChat platform or different marketplaces, they mature, they start to also place an emphasis on customer or data information, that privacy, how do you actually, at a certain level, of course, not impeding the business need of customers, to be able to then eventually protect their customers' information more, because the cost of cybersecurity is also very high these days. And in terms of what we actually been doing, even through a non-e-commerce deals from WeChat, when you are posting certain content that is, too in the face of advertising, especially, for example, during live stream, etc. So those punishments can be quite huge, and the cost for enterprises could be quite huge. They are actually spending a lot of effort. So for us, at a global level, the compliance team from global MNCs is also very very high in terms of understanding what they can be doing and not doing. So that's actually creating a lot of red tape for us actually internally. But I would say that, to be fair, because it's on the forefront, a lot of people are looking at how this technology would evolve as well. And since China is actually leading the way in terms of this technology, I think a lot of people are also looking and trying to learn how this technology will impact privacy. And I think in the sustainable role, I think brands and organizations definitely want to, but probably they don't even know where to start in the first place. Look at Google and Facebook. We probably only realized it after 10 over years that they have been using our data quite rampantly, right? So hopefully it wouldn't take that long, I would say, but I think it's a learning process and we are actually optimizing it along the way. And I think with government policies, as you can see, with government policies that is actually taking an interest in e-commerce, probably right now it's in the tax format. Everyone is trying to implement tax on cross-border payment, but I guess eventually in the long run, at a policy level, and there'll be more emphasis on this kind of digital transactions, digital transformation business, and then I think the security of customer data becomes then very important as well.
Thanks so much, Yenton. I think actually I'd like to ask a little bit more about the user design, like considering that it is ultimately a bid, right, to protect the trust that consumers have in companies, regardless of whether this is driven by the penalties for I suppose imposed by governments or whether there are actual costs to revenue. But is there other considerations in terms of user design? And I think Faith could take this question, that incorporate like the idea that of building trust with like the customer.
I think that based on what you're asking just now, right, in terms of data collection or even the use of data, from my perspective as a user experience designer, we have a huge team of experience designer, including researcher, so user experience researcher, then we have data science scientists. That is when you can imagine us like a processor that we process all the unstructured data. Then data scientists basically analyze some of the key information that would be vital for our hypothesis to be proved. So I think in terms of, I think there's a different stage when we're talking about data, specifically the use of data, or is there any breach of use? So, we can't sell unstructured data. Unstructured data meaning that, maybe we get the name, address and all this thing, we get that from shipping. Data is the most expensive thing when it comes to the final goal of a tech company, because you get a lot of insight. Then you can design algorithm, you can design calculation to basically process it. For e-commerce, it's very simple, right? We're trying to basically convert the customer. So what's the difference between a guest and a customer? We have their shipping information. We have their payment payment preference. So I think that is the second stage of data that we've gotten, but we're not going to sell it, which is the most valuable asset for the company. But when we process it, how is it going to be useful information for our product development? So I think for business-wise, it's very clear that, I think like what Adam mentioned just now, cybersecurity, of course, you don't want the breach of your database, then people's going to steal your unstructured data, then you're going to be sued and things like that. But if you go to the consumer side, the case is different now. So data protection law right now, although is getting stricter, but for different countries, they have different rule and regulation. And there isn't a very strict and very precise way right now, because as our technology keep on advancing, there are things that we keep on collecting that is not included in the law. For example, it can be a new MAC ID or a beacon ID. In the future, there will be different kind of ID. Then you need to keep on adding the law. So I think the part of this, right, is that it's very gray, I feel. But for the consumer, to understand this better, which not a lot of people is doing, is that you can read the rule and regulation, terms and condition when you're signing up for a platform. That is where you will know what kind of information they are collecting and using. But then again, I don't think that the mass consumer are so tech savvy right now. So that's why that's the loophole. And you'll see so many lawsuits happening right now, like Facebook talking about using their, just one thing, right, to let you understand this better is that the most valuable in terms of using the consumer data is basically you see a lot of Gmail login, Facebook login, Instagram login. It's an open API whereby you can access some of the base demographic and the data of the existing customer, which is very useful. That's why you see that website keep telling you to sign up via all these platforms. So it's easier to gather your basic data point in order to get more data in the future. Yeah, so that's the convenience for the business.
Thanks so much, Faith. I think it's really quite it is a huge challenge, I think, on the side of regulators to really keep legislating like what data needs to be protected, and it's also even harder for consumers, considering that I think I personally am not one to say that I read every single term and condition, so buyer beware, and that's my fault, right? But I think just drawing a little bit on what Prof. Zhang said earlier about new solutions coming up in terms of cybersecurity and also in blockchain technologies. Like Kai, do you see that in the payment space for e-commerce? Do you see that there are new technologies that are coming up, and what are the relevant technologies?
You mean payments technology for consumers or?
Security solutions for payments. I suppose that you'd have a lot of data passing through your company. So what are the solutions that you see are useful for you?
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is always a very important topic, especially, I mean, in the payments industry. I mean, it is not only for the safety, kind of security of the, you know, of the data, but it's also for the security of the funds, right? So people care a lot about that. So currently, we see I'm not sure like whether this is a new technology or not, but we see like more and more tokenization is absolutely a trend there. Basically, you know, no matter like, you know, PCI or other standard required more and more tokenization, you know, in the transaction of the data, so that, you know, we won't really transmit the user's data or our customers' data directly, but we more use a tokenization way to really transmit that. So this is first thing. And second is like, you know, we also resort to more and more security measures or approaches in those cloud services. As you can see, like, you know, it's not like before that you all store your data or like you run your computation on the server, right? Basically, now it's always run on the cloud. So we use like Google Cloud, Ali Cloud, and also a bit AWS as a multiple kind of a blended cloud solution for that. So basically, those cloud services provide a lot of kind of data security and also cybersecurity approaches for us. I mean, to make sure that, you know, the computation of the data and also the storage of the data is really successful. And it is also for, you know, when some bad things happen, so that you can recover your data very quickly through those kind of a multi cloud setup. So the uptime of our system can be quite much assured. Yeah, I think those are 2 points that I hope to be useful.
Thanks so much, Kai. I think that's just looking at the emergence of new technologies and I suppose new solutions definitely need to be more have to adjust and have to be a lot more versatile. I think just to pull back a little bit and to see and to look a little bit at this region, I suppose that and I apologize, Prof. Zhang, this may not be within your scope of research, but I understand that some of the industry professionals on this panel are also working or living in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is obviously less mature in terms of technology, in terms of the retail space itself, compared to China, where a lot of the groundbreaking work is being done. So, but I would like to ask the panel in general, what do you think would be the difficulties for new retail to take off in Southeast Asia? We do have players like Lazada, like Shopee, Tokopedia, Bukalapak that are really trying to grow, but they are definitely not at the stage what can take them to the next stage where we find that maturity like China.
Maybe I'll take that first. Yeah, so I think, Ben, you actually pointed out something very interesting in terms of what I mentioned earlier on as well, in terms of using some inspirations. I think the key barrier right now is that the whole ecosystem outside of China, for example, is totally different. And because of this trend, there's no established or similar format that you can use. And I'm not saying that the whole e-commerce platform or technology or in terms of social messaging would actually work outside of China. But having said that, I think for emerging countries, they will actually have to rely on prominent platforms that will be actually able to integrate that kind of solutions as a whole. I would don't get me wrong. I think some interesting local tech is also very interesting, especially, for example, you mentioned about Indonesia right now. I think specifically in the marketplaces like Tokopedia and stuff like that is very interesting. But I think in terms of the technology integration, is actually even way harder for them to actually understand than say Shopee or Lazada level. It's probably easy for me to talk to Shopee to try to make them understand, of course, for obvious reasons, and then convincing Tokopedia to actually let me integrate their some part of the data into messaging. And from a messaging perspective, for example, then what are the prominent messaging platforms that will be actually able to integrate that? There's also, I think, a key hurdle from a technology perspective, I guess. Then from the other retail perspective, I think the fun part would also be that the consumption behavior is also different in this kind of countries, specifically in ASEAN. So I'm not the best expert here to talk on behalf of the entire ASEAN region, but from what we are observing right now, consumer behaviors or macro consumer behaviors differs quite a fair bit from, for example, in Vietnam, where we are actually working with Senso, for example, to even Tokopedia in Indonesia. So the kind of user behavior is different, where then I think localized technology, which I'm actually quite confident of, will be able to develop their own style. But then I would say that it might not be a global solution, or it will be a regional friendly solution that you can actually implement. And I think that spells in return for merchants or brands to actually invest more in the local markets by tapping on different platforms. So I think in the future, you also see opportunities in a way where aggregating, syndicating different platforms will be also a huge business from a technology perspective. Yeah.
Oh, that is really, really interesting. I think I think when you said invest more in local markets, I'm sure some of our audience will be quite interested, or I suppose the VC acquainted folk would be quite would be attuned to that. I think I understand that Faith, you worked in with Lazada for a few years. I suppose this was a couple of years ago. But what do you think? I think Yenton spoke a little bit about how the macro consumer behavior differs quite significantly. How was it like rolling out the platforms for the respective markets that you're working on?
Yeah, so basically, when I was working on the Lazada project, which they call it the Voyager, is that they are changing the whole infrastructure of Lazada platform with all the the play that you saw right now. Double 11, Double 12 is basically exactly what we are doing in the Alibaba Group. So what I realized is that as a user experience, the team lead in this project, when I touch base with all the seller and consumer, one thing that I understand is that you must do the right thing at the right time. So for new retail, right, what we imagine new retail is, and the research and report that we saw in China is very different from Southeast Asia. So I give you a very quick example that is more relatable. Okay, so in Indonesian market, a lot of buyers and sellers and consumer will choose cash on delivery. And they don't have so many what we call by the plastic card, which is the credit cards. So you see, right, first is very different. So that means that no matter what kind of payment gateway you are going there, Alipay, for example, you need to have those options that maybe you need to, start doing all this cash on delivery. So second thing is that, the seller in Indonesia is not like the typical seller that when we are doing the seller onboarding, you will basically have a rule, right, and a prerequisite. So the prerequisite for the seller in Indonesia is very different from Singapore and Thailand. Why? Because the seller in Indonesia is more like maybe the type of carousel seller that in Singapore. So when that happens, I think that it's not even about localization. It's about they are at each market that is around us, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand or like Indonesia, is at a very different stage of basically user behavior, seller behavior. They are all at the very different stage, and their business size and the way they do business is totally different. So that is why when people want to come to Southeast Asia, they will always think that, wow, they are like the same. So for example, we talk a lot about social marketing just now. For example, it can be social commerce. It's also very different. Why? Thailand, they love their own artists. They love K-pop, right? So you can use them to promote on TikTok to get good amount of sales. But if you go to Philippines, okay, it's different as well. They love their own celebrity. They have supporting. Indonesia, yeah, maybe. But you look at Singapore. Do you think Singapore have that kind of same characteristic? I don't know. You probably know it from yourself. We don't have that kind of influence. And so what kind of influence we have in terms of the consumer mind? or they probably look at the YouTuber for overseas and all this thing. So understanding the characteristic, right, and doing the the right initial market education and the right strategy is very important, because we are all at the market education stage. But if you go towards Singapore and you think that, oh, I'm gonna start getting all the Singapore celebrities and Singapore influencers to promote to the Singapore market, then I have no comment for that. But it's basically every step plays a very vital role to reach the new retail stage. But I feel that we are still at the market education part. That's why I think that Lazada is also trying, recently they just opened their new retail store at the Robinson Raffles City in City Hall. So you can see that they are starting to test water in a way, testing the market and see how is it going to react. But yeah, we are still at the market education stage. And I think that from my experience, I always see the big giants, how they are going to spend the amount of cash and money to start feeding the market to get enough insight before we move in.
Thanks so much, Faith. I think I think looking at these like huge players, like they look really into like how to hyper localize and give like customers what they want. I don't know whether what I want is seeing Gurmit Singh around the MRT, but I think that maybe they're just trying out, I suppose. I think I understand that Kai, you are based in Greater China, but I understand, but I would like to ask, like, what do you see? I think as you launch into new areas around APAC, like what are the different experiences that you've had that I suppose in launching, I suppose into Southeast Asia?
Yeah, actually, Southeast Asia is a very important payments market for us to cover. And also a lot of our customers, no matter like those are e-commerce or like, live streaming or mobile game, mobile ads, they are all very interested in two markets currently. One is Southeast Asia, the other is Middle East. I think Southeast Asia is very clearly, basically it has a lot of population and implying, a very great potential for the the consuming power. While, on the other hand, we all know like, well, what's there in Middle East, right? So we started in Southeast Asia from like payout perspective as what Faith has shared. Actually, it's very difficult. Not only for consumer to pay those e-commerce platforms. So now we see like there is a lot of wallets arising in Southeast Asia, but let's put aside. But actually, it's also very difficult for those vendors, suppliers, or online celebrities to really receive payments from like different platforms or marketplaces. It's not like China, like everybody has a bank account. Even like the penetration of the bank account in Southeast Asia is not as high as we have imagined. Like when we go to Philippines, like we see like they usually get their money from those pawn shop, and when you go to like Indonesia, basically they receive their payments so still currently through a lot of those cash related. So this is a very difficult kind of things for us to navigate on a payment space, and also it's also for our kind of those platform customers or marketplaces customers, because they have to get those give example like you use Kuaishou and the TikTok as an example. Like now they compete so fiercely, intensely in Indonesia. So it's important for them to pay out to those online celebrities or those people that can bring online traffic to them. But it's a kind of a headache for them, like how to reach out to them, how to pay those people's money. So then it is the other thing that I want to talk about. I think like if I see Southeast Asia, it might be it might be not like China, like you follow the phases of the development, or it's not like Western market, like you have the cash, then you have the cards, and then for China, it's more like you have the cash, you have a bank account, etc. And for US, maybe check is also a very important payment method, right? But for what I have seen in Southeast Asia is like wallet is proliferating on a very extensive basis. basically all the platforms you have mentioned, like no matter for Shopee, they have like SeaMoney, and then you talk about Grab, they have like Grab Pay, and then you talk about Tokopedia, they also have their own payment masters, and also a lot of like different like Alipay are really within the market. So I believe like maybe wallet together with those apps are actually the future of the payments for the Southeast Asia, and it is kind of a much more kind of a deeply rooted in the user scenario. But that also brings about a question or the problem issues, I mean, in this industry, if the wallet penetration is way ahead of the card payments. As you know, card payments is quite neutral. No matter like your Visa card, your MasterCard, every kind of merchants will accept that, like and also every consumer will accept that. But it's very difficult for you to imagine, an Alipay user can pay their money to a WeChat Pay user, right? This is because those oligopoly in this market basically makes the competition difficult. So I'm not sure, like whether it's in the future in the Southeast Asia markets, like people has to install so many different apps just to like to facilitate the payments in all those different platforms. But hopefully we can really bring about an ecosystem which is more open, and regardless of those kind of a different the competition, and really bring the benefits to the consumers, to the merchants, to the ecosystem.
Thanks so much, Kai. I think as a consumer, I can definitely stand behind that and say that we do have a very scattered ecosystem in terms of payment methods. And I do have 4 different payment apps on my phone, and it's quite difficult to manage all of that. I think just as a short question for Prof. Zhang before we pivot into the Q&A segment. I think earlier you talked a little bit about AI and the issue of the black box, right? That you use data and you focus, and sometimes it's not extrapolatable to other situations. Do you think that that's the challenge for companies that will expand into Southeast Asia, especially as they use AI or ML within their solutions?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I think it's less a problem to expand to China than to other countries, because for China, we have a large population. So in general, the majority rule would work. So, and as I said, machine learning works much better when there big data and people are more likely to be similar. So I just want to make a simple example. So like one time when I flew back from US to China, my PayPal just cannot be logged in, so it does not work anymore. And then I contacted the customer service. They said it's because my location changed dramatically, so my account got blocked. And I said, then I can upload passport, everything to identify myself. Could you release my account? They said they cannot because it's completely machine learning algorithm. So that's too sad. And then I just have to wait for 5 months before the machine learning algorithm think my account is back to normal. And so that's something would be ridiculous. Like so I think for this kind of thing, if you stay in China, you stay in Shanghai, I guess black box might not be a huge issue, but like it might be a more challenge, as you just mentioned, if we want to expand the market to Southeast Asia and also to Europe and US, because in those places, the population density is not that high and people are more diverse, especially, for example, in the US. So I would doubt, besides machine learning, there needs to be collaboration of experts who can also build models to test the novel situations. Yes.
Thanks so much, Prof. Zhang. I think for whoever's in the audience who are AI or ML experts, I think this is definitely a space that you can look into, or perhaps found the next unicorn. I think so. Now we'll just look at the Q&A. I understand that we are a little bit short on time. We've had quite a fruitful discussion. So I would take a couple of questions together, and I will ask our panelists if you would kindly just respond to whichever you would like to take. So I think there's a question in the chat box that asks, what do you think is a comparative advantage that the East, so referring to Asian countries, in regards to new retail, and how can we compete with the West's brand in the field? And I suppose that this person is referring to traditional brands like, I suppose, Amazon and eBay. How can they how can the companies in Asia compete with them on a global scale? And the second question that we can look at is also, I think, more on a micro level. William in the audience has asked, how are firms, in light of new retail, diversifying themselves? I'll give you guys maybe 10 seconds to think over your answers, and whoever like to jump on it, please go ahead.
Okay, I think I can share a bit. So from the brand's perspective, let's say, for example, it can be, brands in terms of like Amazon or Alibaba, or even like literally brand owners themselves. So I've worked with China brand and a US based brand and Europe based brand. So what I realized, right, is that brand itself is like a character, it's like a person. They are basically performing at different stages. So you can see that, we like Netflix and all this thing, it's all very similar. I think that in terms of how we can compete, right, as if you really want to compare like East and West, the difference is that you see the characteristic of Amazon, they didn't really start off doing a lot of live stream or even content play. They spend a lot on all these very tactical and more towards another kind of strategy. This kind of content play, right, is basically a bit uniquely the East side at the start. Of course, right now the foreigner also like TikTok and all this thing, but you will see that the content is also very different. If you see the content from the US, what they are playing, and the Chinese, what they are playing, or even the maybe Southeast Asia, some might like the Asian Chinese content more, some might like the Western more. You will see that there will be a gray area whereby there will be for example, maybe there's 吃播, which is the one that people keep on eating. That's like a trend for both sides. So I feel that the uniquely is the understanding of the culture, which is a very big topic right now. As you can see right now, there is in US there's all these like Asian kind of like news happening every day. It's because of the when there's conflict, right, you are understanding that there's basically difference. So I feel that that is when diversity and inclusion will come in, because I think in terms of, if we specifically talk about the Singapore point, is that the best to understand consumer right now from a user experience eyes is that you be very mutual. You just see them as a male and female, West and East, then maybe elder or like married mom or non married. It's just a different kind of characteristic and a different kind of persona. So when we look at that, right, I feel that as you really need to do something that you understand the culture, you agree with the culture, and you are blend into the culture. Then that is when you can do that exact target audience that you are looking at. Of course, as a researcher, you will always try to understand everyone. It's like sociology, right? You understand everyone, then you try to be very fair in understanding their point of view and deliver something for them. So I think in terms of the competitive edge is really the understanding of the exact user consumption behavior for the East. Then if you do that, then you will definitely make it lah. It's a matter of time that you will make it. Yeah, so that's my point of view.
Would anybody like to jump in or chip in on what Faith has already said?
For me, I would just add on that part. Actually, before I start, back to the machine learning part, I just wanted to talk about a bit, also share a bit more in terms of machine learning. I think the localization actually is related to what Faith is talking about. The localization of content and information is going to be very important in the field of AI and machine learning as well. I think that's actually we are doing some part in terms of automating content. So imagine your live stream content from Southeast Asia translated into Chinese or dubbed in Chinese. You can actually use that in terms of AI and machine learning. Just something that just now I think Prof. Zhang was talking about. So I think it will be interesting in that particular field, specifically for new retail and content localization. I think in terms of what we are talking about right now in terms of e-commerce businesses, what is the advantages between East and West? I think there's advantages on both sides. Each other is trying to learn from each other as well. So just one example, even though for what we are doing in terms of our integration to Jingdong, right? The application of that is different, where in terms of the data use is actually different from how the US is using. Actually, Amazon was one of the earliest that came out with the e-commerce DSP. So they're actually using their DSP information for brands to be able to serve ads, not within the Amazon ecosystem, but also on, say, for example, cable TV right now. So in the US, you actually can get, whatever you talk about just now. Hey, how come Facebook or Google knows what I've been searching for, or my mom is searching for? Actually, in Amazon, in the US, in Amazon, they can actually serve you ads on your cable TV as well. So these are different kind of applications, but I think the advantage that the East has is the integration of the social messaging, which then you see players like Facebook and Instagram is trying to catch up on. In that perspective, I think those are some of the advantages that the so-called East will have it. I think both ends, to me, is really taking inspirations from the both worlds and trying to find the localized version that works for. So for example, I'm personally very interested in places like Vietnam and Indonesia. So how does it work for Vietnam and Indonesia? Again, the play is totally different. They might need to integrate part of what they see as the social part of things, but then how do we integrate from a content perspective? Just now I think Faith was talking the kind of content they are looking, what happens to those people that prefer the kind of content play that the West has advantages, or in the Western and culture that we actually embedded on, how does that play into that? I think it's a combination of both, and then I think the winner will take, or rather than focusing on what is the East and we just fight as an East, I think it's really combining the best of both worlds. Yeah, that's all I can add on.
Thanks so much, Yanton. Kai, you're in a multinational company that straddles both the East and the West. So what do you think?
So first of all, I mean, like, yeah, I saw this question. So first, I'm not really a big believer, like, in the difference between the East and West. I mean, like, it's an easy way to kind of distinguish a lot of things, but I don't think it really reflects the nature of a lot of things. But let me still try to answer this question. Like, if we're talking about the incumbent brands, compare with those new retail, basically I see quite some difference. First, it's like new retail is really rooted in or the advantage of new retail is like it is really rooted in a lot of user scenarios. You won't feel clearly that, oh, you just want to go shopping, or you just want to buy something, then you buy something. Actually, it is like, when you see a video, you might want to buy something. It is like, you are do some kind of an online gym class, you might want to buy something. So the retail is now kind of really embedded in a lot of user scenarios, instead of like, okay, it's just like a shopping cart model. Like you go to the mall and then basically you pick the brands. So having said that, it means like the brand itself is also blur its edge between the brand and the user scenarios. I mean, when when the brand can serve the user scenario very well, it can really intrigue people's kind of a purchasing behavior. So I think this is the first advantage that I can see. The second is like for the new retail and compared to those to those incumbent brands, I would say it is actually more and more kind of a go-to or tailored to the customers' demands, or the customers' new rising demands. Good example, like for in the past, maybe you will see like using Coca-Cola as an example. There won't be so many choices for you, right? Basically, like it's a cola, it's a Sprite, and then it's a Fanta, right? And then now you have like sugar without sugar, something around that. But if you take I'm not sure how to say that in English, a brand called like Yuanqi Senlin, the ginkgo forest, I remember, maybe that's the name. But basically, if you see their SKUs, it's almost like more than 50. So it's like they can bring so many varieties to the market, and then with kind of a competitive cost. So the things behind that is like the change of the flexible supply chain. So you can see players like PDD, and you also players like Xiaomi actually shift the supply chain a lot. Like it's not like it is not like in the before on supply model, but it's now like on demand model. And they really listen to the customers. They really understand the customers. They drive their decision based on the data, based on the marketing data, and based on a lot of consumer needs. So it's not only in those new retail, but also you can see like those entertainments, even even more apparent. Like, Netflix always use like, those audience kind of data to really decide what is the ending of a drama, right? So basically, I think, data actually change a lot of things. And this is another advantage fundamentally with the new retail space.
Thanks so much, Kai. I think we are running a little bit short on time, so I'll give Prof. Zhang the last word on the discussion. So what do you think? I think you mentioned in your speech about technology, and I think just canvassing it as a academic. What do you think do you think that the East has a comparative advantage in terms of technology versus the West?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. So I read Kai and Yan. I don't think there is such a discrepancy between East and the West, because now we have a lot of international collaborations. Another thing is, I want to just give a very concrete example. For example, for Bitcoin, so you can see actually the major mining ports are in China, are in Asia. So it's very interesting. Even though the more innovative product designs might be in Switzerland and US, Silicon Valley, but the mining ports are more likely to be in China. So I would say for the technology part for China, so we one thing is that we have the population. So the technology in the new retail or digitalization in general, no matter machine learning, everything else, it really needs a large population and people who are similar. So that might be the advantages, like why we can be like a birthplace of the new retail.
Thank you so much, Prof. Zhang. I think it's eminently clear to each of us that that I think the size really does matter, and that affects like the shape of new retail, whether in Asia or otherwise. I think at this juncture, I'd like to thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your views on new retail. We've covered everything from regulations all the way to user design. I think I've really benefited from hearing your views and the ground views of how the space has changed. Hongying, do you have? I would like to pass the time over to Hongying just to wrap up the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all the speakers today for the insightful discussion. I feel like as the role of technology continues to take like foothold in the world, possibilities have become very endless, especially in the realm of new retail. Once you erase the line between offline and online, as the speakers have talked about just now, and how we reimagine and personalize it the way consumers actually want it, I feel like possibilities are really, really endless in today's society. So once again, I want to thank you, Faith, Prof. Lu Yao, Yan-Ten, and Kai for your time today and for sharing all your insights. And thank you, Ben, for moderating this panel. I think it was a very fruitful discussion. So thank you to all the participants for attending today's panel. We have an entertainment panel and another technology panel coming up. So I hope to see all of you there. Yep. So thank you all for all your time today. I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.